And we'll begin with the game at Kenilworth Road, where Luton Town scored a dramatic 90th minute winner to beat Coventry City 1-0. 3 reviews for Luton. Skeeter on our Patreon says, complete frigging chaos. Andrew says, oh my heart. For Coventry, Bav says, keeper is shite. Sky Blue Cal on our Patreon says, wheels fallen off. What a crazy game this was, Justin. You had the 2 red cards, which we'll talk about shortly. A very fiery affair with Luton constantly knocking on the door, struggling to find that way through. And then all of a sudden, mix up at the back for Coventry. The ball falls to Shandon Baptiste to score a 90th minute winner. And the scenes were sensational, Justin.
It was such a shit goal.
That's what we want. We want this kind of shitness.
But honestly, that's exactly, this pretty much sums up the beauty of the league in a way. It's such a painful goal to watch, I imagine, from everybody, because you've got Coventry fans whose playoff dreams, promotion dreams, almost falling at the hands of Brad Collins there. and then with Luton, you've got the drama of it falling to Shandon Baptiste, who gets this terrible shot off, which should have been blocked by Lewis Binks. It was almost pretty much an own goal. And honestly, just in the minute it was as well, at the end of the game, it's just absolutely ridiculous. And that's before we even talk about the drama that preceded all of that. But yeah, it was a terrible goal with brilliant luck for Luton. And, with Coventry, you're just wondering what? It's just question marks. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, what on earth was Collins doing? There's absolutely no need for him to come out there, is there? It is a crazy rush of blood to the heads. And fortunately for him, he had Binks, the Coventry defender, taking a bit of the blame off him by making an absolute hash of that attempt to block it on the line. He definitely should have done better with that. But just the roar from the Luton fans, the limbs, it topped off what was a really entertaining game, despite it being goalless for so long. I was glued to my screen for about 90 minutes. It was a really good 0-0 up until the obviously winner right at the end. It was really, really good stuff. And a big part of that entertainment was those 2 red cards, one for Coventry's Jay De Silva after just 13 minutes, the other for Luton's Liam Walsh in the second half. What did you think to both of them, Justin?
Neither are red cards. Ollie Langford, the referee, he sent Trey Hume off against Bristol City, can't remember when it was now, a couple of weeks ago, for the same thing. So I'd like to know what his rationale is for the Jay De Silva red card. I think it's contact, yes. It's just whether or not there's so many variables that come into play with that being a red card or not. I wouldn't give it as a red card personally. That being said, I don't think VAR overturns that if we have it. And the Liam Walsh one, okay, he puts himself in a bit of bother by pushing, was it Lewis Binks that he pushed? Shouldn't do it, but at the same time, it's not a red card either, because he's pushed him, and Lewis Binks has made a great meal of it. Frank Lampard was also complaining about an Isaiah Jones kick out on a Coventry player, which he said it was a red card. That's not a red card. No red cards happened in this game. Simple for me.
I think you're wrong, because the first one by the letter of the law is a red card because he's the last man. But should it be a red card is the question I would ask, because it's completely accidental. He's not even making a challenge, is he? It's the faintest of contacts. So what has Jay De Silva actually done wrong? Run towards his goal. It doesn't make any sense, really. So the punishment doesn't fit the crime for me. The referee was right to give a red card because that's the rules. It's a foul and he's the last man. But for Coventry to be down to 10 men so early on in the game when Jay De Silva hasn't really done anything wrong feels like an issue with the rules for me. So that's where I sit with that one. The other one for Liam Walsh, God, it's very, very soft, isn't it? It's daft from him to do anything that could tempt the referee when he's on a yellow card. But he got a straight red for it, for just pushing a player. If we give reds for every time that happens, then we'd be having 9v9 games all the time, Justin. So yeah, I agree with you to an extent on the Liam Walsh one and the Jay De Silva one, actually, for that matter. But yeah, 2 curious decisions, it's got to be said. The only thing I can think of is the referee didn't properly see it and saw that one out the corner of his eye, because if he watched that back, I'd be surprised he still thought it was a red, Justin.
I will add, it's worth saying, actually, that Ollie Langford, and a couple of people point this out on social media, Ollie Langford giving Liam Walsh a red card probably does Luton a favour if they decide to appeal it, because I would be surprised if it doesn't get rescinded. But obviously, if he gets a second yellow, he's suspended for a big crunch game next weekend. So there's an almost a positive to him being sent off, despite it potentially, or he could have cost Luton a game. So there is that. It doesn't excuse the decision because it wasn't a red card. It probably was a yellow. So there is that. But it was just, I don't think the referee probably had a grip on the game. It was a very high-tempered game, which I think he struggled with, to be honest.
By the way, 3 red cards now for Liam Walsh this season. He's only the second player in the last 6 championship seasons to receive 3 red cards in a single campaign, which is pretty good going, really, isn't it? But look, Luton won't care because they've taken another significant step towards safety. They're outside of the bottom 3 for the first time since the start of January. And Justin, we said on Friday that how dramatic the relegation battle looks on the final day depended an awful lot on how Luton got on in this game, and they've duly delivered in that regard.
They did, and I think, look, if you take away from the drama of the game, the way they managed the game in itself was brilliant. Coventry started really slowly, and Luton took advantage of that. And I think everything that I said in our preview about Luton wanted it more in the sense that the urgency was there. The urgency was there, and you felt that. And they were really knocking on the door. I do think a win was fully deserved because Brad Collins, despite his absolute clangor, was a very busy goalkeeper. He made some really, really big saves. I think that was actually one from Taylor Asgard or Liam Walsh, long-range shot that he tipped onto the crossbar. It was a beautiful save. Luton were really, really banging on the door. And just the way they approached the game, they approached the game, I wouldn't say like they had nothing to lose, but the way they played certainly felt there was an air of freedom about them. And then Coventry going out to 10 men, you just felt that, that freedom was there. It really was. So them being in the position they're in the table didn't feel like that at all in this game, which was absolutely, I've said it time and time again already in this episode. It's ridiculous, really. But look, that's the quality Luton have got. We know that. And they delivered on it here.
Yeah, well, essentially the scenario was for Luton, whatever the result was that they got against Coventry, the more teams they would be able to potentially overtake on the final day. And that's obviously a great thing for them. And now they are so close to completing a great escape. Don't get me wrong, they should have never been in this position to begin with, but for them to be in this position now, considering where they were 10 games ago, is pretty incredible, and Matt Bloomfield deserves a lot of credit for that. There's still a lot of work to do on the final day because their goal difference is significantly worse than everyone else down there. Anything but a win really leaves their fate up to the footballing gods, but 3 wins on the bounce, they're full of confidence, facing a West Brom side with nothing to play for. It's magical stuff. From a Luton perspective. And we shouldn't forget this result has big implications on the playoff race as well, because Coventry are now massively sweating. They're still in the top 6 on goal difference, but they've got 3 teams directly behind them who can now catch them, including, of course, Middlesbrough, who they face on the final day in essentially a playoff for a playoff place. And Coventry's form has certainly deserted them, hasn't it? 5 losses in 9 now. Justin, is this the Lampard effect?
I think it is. I think they've run into a bit of a hole. I think, firstly, I will say again that the way they started the game, they were really slow, quite sluggish, and Luton really took advantage of that, as I mentioned a moment ago. And you look at how slow Jay De Silva was to turn at the time he was given the red card. No one really reacted to that ball coming over. It was a wonderful, wonderful pass into the space behind the Coventry defence. And, as I say, the way they started the game, it allowed Luton in. But their form, as you say, is poor. You look at their record against teams sort of in the bottom 8. They've only beaten Oxford away from home. So their away form against teams at the bottom of the table is incredibly poor, and this is just another one. So again, you're looking at why is Lampard struggling to beat these teams? It could cost them. It could cost them a place in the top 6, which is would be at this stage probably a travesty. Again, if you look at the amount of money that's been spent, etc., and how well things have been going under Lampard, this really is the first stumbling block we've seen, and it's at the worst possible time.
Well, yeah, it's funny because I was getting it from all angles when Lampard was doing well, but it's all gone very quiet now on my social media, Justin. But look, the fact of the matter is it's not too surprising that Coventry have dropped off, because towards the end of that run where they won a ridiculous 9 in 10, they were really pushing their luck with some of those victories, and now their luck has run out. And they're left hanging on to a playoff place that they should have very easily wrapped up a considerable amount of time ago. Because now the odds are that Coventry will still get a playoff place on the final day. But if they don't, Lampard has to take the blame for that, because in the last 9 games, they've lost to Derby, Luton, Plymouth, and failed to beat Hull. That's 4 of the bottom 5 heading into this weekend that they failed to beat. They will have no one else to blame but themselves, Justin, if they don't wrap up the playoffs in this season.
Well, you look at the big decision that he's had to make, probably the big decision other than a couple of formation changes. Brad Collins, he's dropped another clanger here. I know he's kept them in the game up until he dropped his clanger, but he's been at the mistake of a few things in recent weeks, and he's potentially cost Coventry a really big point here. Can they go with Ben Wilson? Is the point I'm trying to make, and Lampard's not made that decision despite a couple of examples in recent weeks of it being, a few shaky performances from Collins. So I think there is some finger pointing you can do at Frank Lampard. I think the way he spoke about some sort of decision making from the referee, it tells you that he's a bit under pressure as well. But I do think, and quite rightly, that there will be criticism coming his way should this team drop out of the top 6. I know a lot of Coventry fans actually will probably say, well, we were sort of down at the bottom of the table when he took over. I still don't think it's an excuse, because stats wise, data wise, it was arguably, I wouldn't say better under Robbins, but the numbers have started to really plateau under Lampard, and that's the main worry. If your numbers start to drop, performances are catching up basically.
In a massive relegation 6-pointer, Derby County got a huge 1-0 victory away at Hull City thanks to an 84th minute winner from Nat Phillips. 3-word reviews for Derby. DG says Nat Phillips header. Daj Merchant says Eustace Barmy Army. Craig says Eustace the genius for Hull. Darren says beaten by hoofball. Miles says tactically naive again. Justin, I nearly gave my poor dog a heart attack when that goal went in. He was halfway through having a snooze, and suddenly there I was screaming in his face that I want Nat Phillips's babies. What a moment, though. And the carnage in the Derby end showed how big a goal that could be, because everything's changed now for Derby County, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. Look, let's look at if they hadn't have won, even if they'd come away from Hull with a draw, I really do think their survival chances would have been significantly lower. I know statistically and numerically that would have been the case anyway, but the way they win in the sort of the final stages of the game, probably the only shot on target in the entire game itself. It was a game devoid of quality. This was the big moment for both teams, really. And then Nat Phillips was with an absolute cement head that he had. Honestly, the guy heads everything. And he puts it away as emphatically as he does. From a Craig Forsyth cross, by the way, or a free kick. A Derby legend. I'm going to throw it out there. He's an absolute legend of the club in my eyes. It's monumental. It's absolutely monumental. And obviously with the manner of the win against Hull as well, it just pulls them right into it. And that's what Derby needed. They needed teams between them and the bottom 3, and they've got it.
It was only Nat Phillips's 3rd goal of his career, by the way. His first in a Derby shirt, and what a time to get it. Honestly, I must have watched that goal about 50 times since yesterday. Just watching the limbs in the Derby end, and you mentioned Craig Forsyth. That cross was absolutely pinpoint as well. It was definitely a game which lacked a lot of quality, particularly from a Hull perspective. Some of their shooting was appalling, but the cross and the header, they were pretty special. And as we say, all of a sudden, Derby's survival chances are looking very, very good. They've jumped up to 19th. Their highest position they've been in since mid-January. And on the final day, all they need to secure safety is a win, or just one of the 3 teams below them to lose. And keep in mind they're facing Stoke on the final day at home. So actually, Justin, I'd go as far to say that now Derby are the best placed out of those 5 teams still fighting to stay up on the final day.
Yeah, it puts them in a really strong position. I think what we've seen in recent weeks is there can be a set of freak results. We go back to Easter Monday, every team winning other than Cardiff in the sort of the bottom 4, bottom 5. Derby can't really afford to sort of rest on their laurels. They can't afford to be complacent. They need to go to Stoke and try and look to win the game as best as they can. But obviously a draw might actually end up suiting them anyway. But you'd just rather not rely on teams below you dropping points. As I say, I think the way the Championship and the bottom of the table especially has played out over recent weeks, you just cannot rely on anyone. No one's reliable here. Everyone's picked up form. As I say, the bottom 6 other than Cardiff and Preston, there's some of the form teams in the division, for goodness sake. So I think having that mindset of, other teams could do it for us, just, get rid of that. Go out and beat Stoke, and then that puts another team between you and the bottom 3 if other teams below you win. So, they are in a good position, but is any position good going into a final day relegation battle grand finale? I don't know.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, Justin. We all know anything can happen on the final day. We've seen it happen quite a lot over the years. But when you consider Derby's form, their goal difference, the fact they just need to equal one of the results of the 3 teams below them, and the fact they're facing a poor Stoke side on the final day, there's an awful lot going in their favour at this stage. And they'll go out there looking to win. I've got no doubt about that. But you've got to say the odds have massively swung in their favour. The thing that blew my mind is there's actually a decent chance that Derby end up finishing 17th, which would just be mind-blowing. How's that happened? But it's all looking very rosy for John Eustace's boys. Just need to make sure they get it over the line now, don't they? It's definitely not looking as good for Hull City. They're back in the bottom 3 for the first time since mid-February. And to be honest, I don't think that's ideal with just one game to go, is it? It means they have to avoid defeat at Portsmouth on the final day. Otherwise, they'll be down. But even then, they're still relying on results elsewhere, Justin, which is never ideal.
Fratton Park's the last place I want to go to as well to get a win, if you need a win.
I think Ellen Road may tip that over, Justin, but I get what you're saying.
Because
Fratton
they might
Park's
be on
a difficult
the
place to go.
They might be on the piss. But it's staggering, really, that Hull have found themselves in this position. I mean, we can dissect it, minutely, because there's a lot to dissect with Hull and the mistakes they've made this season. But one person, there is probably a certain amount of criticism that should be put his way. I do want to try and devoid Ruben Sellers of too much criticism, because even in this game against Derby, a draw wouldn't have been a bad result for Hull. It would have been a fairly positive one. And it was one moment of quality with the free kick and the header that changed the game. We were saying in the preview show that Hull have only conceded 9 goals from set pieces this season, which is one of the league's lowest. That was just a moment of real quality from Derby that Hull were just on the other end of. That being said, consistency has been the issue for Hull, which has pulled them into the bottom 3. And I made a comment about them being dragged into it. And I know Hull fans will say, well, we've been in it all season. But genuinely, I've not felt any sort of, I've been fairly confident that Hull would get out of it. But it's that lack of, being able to back up a win with another win that's really put them in the shit, really bluntly. They've won back-to-back games just once this season. That was under Tim Volter in September when they won 3 in a row. They've not managed it since, and that's the issue. That really is the problem. So yes, it's a quite a situation, but if anything, it should be a wake-up call to, I would say, Acca Nilakali more than anybody else.
Yeah, well, just looking to the final day, one good thing for Hull is that they've got good goal difference, because that means a draw might be enough for them to overtake Luton and Preston, while a win would mean they could even go ahead of Stoke if Derby beat them. But we've been saying for weeks, Justin, that we'd be surprised if Hull actually went down, and so for them to be heading into the final day in the bottom 3 is pretty astonishing, really. This is an insane stat, Justin, like a genuinely mad stat. Since Ruben Sellers came in, Hull have taken points off 10 of the 12 teams in the top half. But in that time, they've also lost to 5 of the other 6 teams in the bottom 7, including now, of course, Derby County. I'm not even sure what that stat tells us, but it's crazy. isn't it? How they just struggle so much against the teams around them. And look, it's one contributing factor as to why Hull are in grave danger on the final day. That, plus their home form, obviously, which has gone on about constantly, the injuries they've had, the stupid decision to sack Liam Rosenior in the first place. I could go on. But what I'm trying to say is Hull are in a position where they have to get a result on the final day. And the reason that they're in this position is rather self-inflicted. So that's just unfortunately the sad state of affairs with Hull City. By the way, it wouldn't surprise me if Ruben Sellers is sacked this summer, whether they stay up or not, because if they're sacking Liam Rosenior for what he did, then Sellers must be in danger. Justin, I don't know if you've got a take on that.
Oh, whatever league they're in, they need Ruben Sellers. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair, to be honest. Despite what's happened this season, I still think he doesn't deserve a whole lot of the blame. But yeah, crazy what I've just read out there. But Derby and Luton both winning, Justin, means we've been gifted the perfect final day, which we were hoping for on Friday, a 5-way relegation dogfight. Just 2 points separating 5 teams. Oh my word, it's what dreams are made of, Justin. I cannot wait.
Just the way we like it, Ryan, a 5-way. It's, we were talking in the preview about wanting chaos, and we've got it. We've got it. We absolutely have it. And, you got Derby and Stoke. That's obviously the game to keep an eye on. But you've got Preston who have been sucked into it. Hull needing to beat West Brom, who are the draw specialists. So there's so much excitement there. But that's it. That is the Championship. And again, penny for John Eustace's thoughts, by the way, who had the same scenario last season, where it came down to the final day. The man needs a break from this drama.
Well, considering he chose this drama
after leaving Blackburn
to go to Derby, maybe he just enjoys it. Maybe he's a psychopath. I don't know. But yeah, I can't recall the last time we had anything like this, where you've got 5 teams all in danger still. There may have been occasions before where there were a lot of teams still mathematically in danger, but were just about safe. We've got 5 teams here who have relatively even levels of danger, maybe including Stoke in that as well, because some have been dismissing them, but I don't really think you can. And just the little things like Hull having a better goal difference than 3 of the other 4 teams down there. If Hull get an early goal, then it's going to be carnage on that final day. So, it's getting really, really juicy. Justin, we'll have a quick break. But before that, let's do our review of the previous show picks that we did on Friday, because our bet builder was on Stoke v Sheffield United, and a £5 stake was due to return £70, thanks to SBK's 50% boost. We had Sheffield United to win, which was a winner. 2-1, never understood that. We had Gustavo Hamer to have a shot on target. He didn't play for some reason, so that selection was voided. But we also had over 2.5 goals and under 4.5 cards, which were both losers, so it didn't matter anyway. On to our multiple, where a £10 stake was due to return £446. You ready for this, Justin? We had Sheffield United to win, which was a winner. We had Luton to win, which was a winner. We had the outsider of Derby to win, which was a winner. And we had Middlesbrough to win, who drew 0-0. That's how close we were to a £446 accumulator. Justin, I feel sick.
It's Borough for you. Always letting you down. Goody Borough.
They've let us down a few times this season, haven't they?
Much.
And this is the most ill feeling that I have towards them after the numerous times they've done it this season. But anyway, we'll be back with our next round of picks for the final day of the season in next Friday's preview show, brought to you by SBK. Justin, we'll have a quick break. After that, we'll talk more about the other teams involved in the relegation battle and Cardiff City getting relegated. Welcome back to the Second Tier podcast, and it's now time for us to reveal the winner of our latest edition of Jameson's Weekend Hero, because every single week we ask you to nominate a fellow Championship fan that you believe deserves recognition. Now, that could be someone who drove you to a recent away day, or it could be a friend or a relative who got you into supporting your club in the first place. Whatever it is, we want to find out. So to nominate your Jameson Weekend Hero from this weekend, send us a voice note right now on WhatsApp explaining your nomination. The number is in the show notes. It's last chance saloon, ladies and gents, because next week will be our last one where you can send one in, so make sure you get involved now. But our penultimate one in terms of the listener nominations is this one from Liam.
Hi lads, my name's Liam. I'm a Sheffield United fan, and I'd like to nominate my old man Paul. I'm nominating him for a few reasons, mainly for deciding in his youth that he knew better than his own dad and his brother, who were both big Wednesday fans. Thankfully, he saw the light and has loved United ever since. Legend has it that when I came along, he obviously didn't want to take any chances that my loyalty could be swayed towards the blue half of Sheffield, so he actually registered me with the club as a junior blade before he officially registered my birth. So he had his priorities right. We did have season tickets when I was a young lad, and I've got many, many cherished memories of going to beautiful downtown Brom Lane with my dad. And although our schedules mean we don't really get to many games these days, I do still take immense pleasure when we get to mark the calendar for the games that we are both able to attend. He's undoubtedly passed his love for the club down to me, and I'm incredibly thankful that I've been able to grow up sharing a love of the best club in Sheffield with him. Thanks, Dad. Up the Blades.
Oh, I love that, Justin. That's really nice, isn't it? I think when I eventually have a child, God forbid, then I will be doing a similar thing to that, I think, just registering him as quickly as possible as a Derby County fan.
Yeah, register them as quickly as possible as a Derby fan, get them a Derby County grow, and they've got no choice then, have they? They are locked in for life. I mean, fair play. You know, Wednesday supporting family, Blades family. It's completely separated. It was great. Just great.
Yeah, well, we've spoken about it loads of times, haven't we, whenever we've covered the Steel City derby, that, you know, it's a strange scenario in Sheffield where you have, it's a rare scenario, really, because obviously it's the same in Liverpool, Manchester and whatever. But in Sheffield, you've got, you know, two pretty evenly sized clubs in the same city, and it is a thing that splits families on occasions. And this is a great example of it here. But I think that deserves recognition from Paul in managing to get Liam nailed down as early as possible to the red side of Sheffield, because that is good stuff. And for that, let's raise a glass of Jameson Ginger and Lime to Paul, who is this weekend's Jameson weekend here. And we're going to have a quick swig now to honour this occasion. Oh, beautiful. Beautiful as always. And as I say, it's your last chance this week to nominate your Jameson Weekend Hero. So send us a voice note right now on WhatsApp. Just needs to be about a minute long. The number is in the show notes, and you could be next week's winner. You must be over 18 to enter, UK only. TCCs apply. Let's get back on to some of the action then from this weekend, Justin. And we've been talking about the relegation battle quite a lot so far in the show. One team who won't be involved in that is Cardiff City. It's because they've been relegated to League One after a goalless draw at West Brom. 3 word reviews for Cardiff. Amapreet says long overdue relegation. NWM says Vincent Tan out. Mikey says the board's fault. Lewis says F the board. Yeah, not too much to mention from the game itself, apart from an insane moment where Cardiff had 4 shots, 3 of which were saved, 1 hit the post, and that pretty much summed up Cardiff's season in a nutshell, that 5 seconds that all that happened in. But Cardiff needed to win here to stand any chance of staying up on the final day. But it's now official. Cardiff City are going down. So, in as brief a summary as you can, Justin, where's it gone wrong for Cardiff City this season?
This season, you can go back for several seasons. It's been death by 1,000 cuts for Cardiff. I mean, ever since Vincent Tan took over, the atmosphere at the club's been toxic, hasn't it? Obviously, for the first time now since 2003, Cardiff will be playing in the third tier of English football. The club lost its identity under the ownership. The legacy of Premier League football disappeared within weeks of relegation years ago. And I think Vincent Tan needs to come forward and explain what the future of the club looks like. But, you know, if you're looking at things solely on this season, it's the managerial decision-making. At the time Errol Bullitt was sacked, both Alex Neil and Gary Rowett were available, and look at the jobs they're doing at their respective clubs. Instead, Cardiff took their time or were negligent in their decision-making. Either way, they opted for the least experience possible, and they've paid the price for it. The running of the club's a joke. We've said this time and time again for the past 2 or 3 years now. They need football people at the club, because it's clear that the likes of Tan Kessler, the chairman, Ken Chu, the CEO, and obviously Vincent Tan, the owner, they've got absolutely no idea.
Yeah, well, I'm planning on doing a full YouTube video explaining what's gone wrong this week, so keep an eye out for that. But to say this has been coming over the last few years is an understatement, isn't it? It's easy to forget Cardiff were in the Premier League just 6 years ago, but this has been a club on a downwards trend for a while, and that's because the club is so badly run, as you allude to, Justin. There's never been a long-term plan, and 8 managers in 4 years is a testament to that. There was no plan with Omar Reitzer. They gave him the job based off a very brief run of form and stuck with him when they've sacked managers for a lot less over the years. It's just comically bad, the decision-making by those at the very top of this club. But another thing is, Aaron Ramsey said afterwards, there's a lot of quality in that team that should be competing towards the top end of the league, never mind League One. Is there? I could not disagree more with that statement. I will be taking many of these players at my club, Derby. But again, that comes down to recruitment, which is bad because the club is badly run. So there's just an awful lot of wrong at Cardiff, and all the fingers have to be pointed to those at the top, because this is all stemmed from, firstly, Vincent Tanner, the people he's put in charge.
Well, exactly. Well, you've said it time and time again. They've been circling the drain for a while, and last season was the book of the trend, or the anomaly, I should actually say. And of course, like last season was the first season since 2019 that the club didn't change manager in during the season. That sort of record's just ridiculous, and that's where I sort of point towards with the club not having an identity. And if you've got football people within the club, that's the first thing you have to create. The most recent example I can sort of closely look into is how Derby have changed their identity over David Klaus's tenure as owner. It's very rooted into the community now. It's very rooted into good decision making, positive decision making, and the club having a very community approach to every decision they make, which is why they kept hold of Paul Warne for such a long time. They were very nice about things. But that's very early on in their process. Cardiff have never done this. And obviously, even since that, Vincent Tan changed the colour of the kits in 2012, there's just been a bad atmosphere at the football club, and a mistrust from the fans. And it's not changed. And why would it? Because the owners have made zero attempt to ever change opinion of them. And that sort of arrogance, unfortunately, that leads you down a very, very bumpy path.
Yeah, well, Cardiff fans, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think even during the good times that Cardiff have had under Vincent Tan, I don't think there's ever been a full embrace of his ownership, because they've just appreciated that he is not a great owner, and now Cardiff have finally paid the price for it. And it's a sad state of affairs, because Cardiff are a big club. A lot of fans we've spoken to in the time that we've been doing this podcast, they don't deserve this, because it's just purely stemming from the ownership. Every time you mention anything wrong with the club, you always round back to the ownership, don't you? And that's why it's a pretty scary state of affairs for what comes next. And that's the big question now, Justin. Will Cardiff City instantly bounce back from League One? What do you think?
I want to say yes, but until there are significant changes at boardroom level, it's hard to see that being the case. Of course, they'll have a big budget. Of course, there'll be a big club in League One. But for me, that doesn't transpire to success at that level. Just look at Huddersfield Town. They've struggled this season, and they've invested heavily. But there's been a certain amount, I wouldn't say arrogance, that would be unfair on the ownership, but complacency. And despite a big budget, they've really struggled to make their mark in League One this season. So it feels like it's more likely to be a Huddersfield than it is a Birmingham, simply because the club is a mess behind the scenes. You look at Sunderland, when they came down from the Championship all those years ago, they were a mess behind the scenes. Yes, Stuart Donald had to do a lot of sweeping, if you like, and even he couldn't solve it, and it was a mess behind the scenes when he was in charge of the football club. So if you've not got things arranged and in the right order at boardroom level, at football level, it's not going to transpire to success on the pitch, and especially at League One, you've got to be a bit more savvier, I think. So I can't see them bouncing back next season.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree with anything you say there, Justin. I honestly don't know whether they will bounce back or not. I think a lot of work needs to be done. Firstly, they need a manager. Cardiff haven't exactly had much success with picking managers over the years, hence why they're in this mess. I think the squad will need a big rebuild. There's a fair few players out of contracts. There's a lot of young talent there who may actually relish the step down to League One. So that's a plus, and I expect Cardiff will spend a fair bit of money to bounce back at the first time of asking. But as I've alluded to, I don't think this squad is that strong It's definitely not that strong in my view that it will cruise League One. And ultimately, this is a club which has been terribly run for a long time, and I can't see their fortunes improving until there's a big clear out of those responsible. So unfortunately, it wouldn't surprise me if Cardiff are stuck in League One for a while. Keep in mind as well, you've got Plymouth going down. If they keep Miron Muslic, I'd put them ahead of Cardiff to go straight back up.
Yeah.
And whoever is the last of those 5 teams to go down, they'll 100% be the favourites to win League One next season. And that's before you even get on to some big clubs already in League One. So, yeah, unless there's a big summer of change coming up for Cardiff, I don't have high hopes.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree with that. You've got to clean house, I think, at Cardiff for them to have any progress going forwards. Unfortunately, they've been dodging bullets for a long time, haven't they? You know, you've only got to go back to the seasons where they've had 3 managers employed. The likes of Steve Morrison, Mark Hudson, Sabri Lamouche. Yeah, they've been through the mire, haven't they? It's been a ridiculous scenario that they found themselves in. Unfortunately, all roads that Cardiff everything that Cardiff have been putting into the club, all roads lead to League One. And unfortunately, it's now happened. Last season was the anomaly, and League One's going to be a struggle unless big changes are made.
Plymouth Argyle got just their 2nd away win of the season by getting a 2-1 victory at Preston. But it doesn't matter much because results elsewhere mean they're all but relegated due to their goal difference. 3-word reviews for Plymouth. Grant says 10th since Muslic. Dominic says down but fighting. Neil says we'll be back. For Preston, Charlie White says League One soon. Yeah, we'll talk more about Preston shortly, but Plymouth deserve credit for not being officially relegated until the final day, Justin, because for a while it looked likely that they would get cut adrift and they may not even finish bottom at this rate, which is, I think, sounds patronising, but I think that is actually an achievement for Plymouth. So I think this final flurry of results shows that things may have been a lot different this season if Miron Muslic was in charge for longer.
Well, I think another way of looking at it is in previous seasons, they may have not even gone down. You know, the standard of points that have been hit so far has been absolutely sensational, really. It's been the best set of, I think, relegation teams that I can remember for a while. So credit to everybody there. But you are right in praising Plymouth, and I don't think it's patting on their head for them that they have got to this position now. And you are right, Miron Muslic deserves a lot of credit. Yeah, he's won 26 points in 20 games, which by no means is spectacular, but if you double it and have it across 46 games, they're going to stay up in the championship. So, for me, with Plymouth, it's going to be a season or a summer, I think, of reflecting a little bit on the decisions they've made, unfortunately, that have put them in this position, because there are some pretty honking ones, to be really, really blunt. But the club has been sort of upfront about it. But you are right. If Miron Muslic, I think, was in charge since the start of the season, yes, hypothetical, I don't think they'd be in danger. I really don't.
Yeah, I agree, because he's done really, really well. He was getting a lot of stick not too long ago from some Plymouth fans saying he wasn't any better than Wayne Rooney, but all I'll say on that is Muslic has now won as many games over his last 9 as Rooney did throughout his entire 25-game spell. So there you go with that. But yeah, Plymouth have given a really good account of themselves in these last few games. I think the business they did in January has really helped them out as well. What's cost them this season was appointing Wayne Rooney. Everyone thought it was a bad move because if they had someone who did slightly better, then they'd perhaps be heading into these final games with a chance of staying up. So that, and perhaps not spending enough last summer, has been Plymouth's downfall this season. But hopefully they'll learn from that going forwards. But looking ahead to the future, Justin, do you think we could see Plymouth bounce back from League One? I suppose a lot depends on whether Muslic stays, doesn't it?
Yes and no. I think Muslic, based on his championship record, he's been brilliant, hasn't he? So I think he's a good. He gives you confidence that they can bounce back quite quickly. I'd consider them favourites going into League One anyway. Should they not score over 20 plus goals on the final day of the season, mind. But I think the way Muslic sets his team up does suit League One. I still feel like they need probably sort of 7 or 8 players at the very least, and certainly better operators in the final third, plus pending replacements for Mustafi Bunda and Ryan Hardy, who I expect to be subject to bids this summer. There's just a couple of players who I think would have interest in them. But I think the club, despite making bad decisions of the managers over the past 12 months in Ian Foster and Wayne Rooney, I've got a good one in Miron Muslic. And I don't expect them to make the same mistakes should Mooselich move on in the summer. They're a well-run club, despite mistakes, as I say. So I would back them to bounce back quite quick, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. I think if Mooselich stays, I would give them a great chance of bouncing back. Keep in mind, they won League One last time with not the biggest of budgets. Now they're going back down with a lot more money from being in the Championship and from player sales. And they've shown in the past that they can spend it very well as well. So, yeah, there's a lot of positives for Plymouth. They've got some decent players too. So as long as there's not wholesale change at the club over the summer, I could definitely see them being back in the Championship in 12 months' time, but we'll wait and see with that. Let's talk Preston, Justin, because we've been saying for a few weeks that they may actually be getting dragged into a relegation battle. Well, they're definitely bloody in it now, aren't they? Because the results from this weekend were essentially the worst ones possible for Preston, and that means they are in serious danger heading into the final day.
Yeah, I worry for Preston. Out of all the teams that are going into the final game in this sort of 5-way relegation battle, they're the team that are out of form. Mentally as well, they haven't been switched into the fight all season. I think that's a key thing that we need to consider here. It's literally probably just been the last 9 or 10 days where it's maybe felt like that's the case. But you compare them to Stoke, Hull, Derby and Luton, they've been fighting for the last 15, 16 games at the very least. And then also, even after the Plymouth defeat, Paul Heckingbottom described it as a scare. And a wake-up call, which for me is quite astonishing because that should have been a case weeks ago. Preston were 11 points ahead of the relegation zone at the start of March. They've won just 7 points since. And then they have to go away to Bristol City where they need to win against a team who might need a win themselves. It's a very, very ugly scenario for Preston.
Yeah, well, may I make the argument that they might actually be the most in danger on the final day because, firstly, they've got 2 teams below them, but Hull have a better goal difference, so a point may be enough for them to overtake Preston, and Luton are in form. Secondly, Preston have got Bristol City away, and I'm going to assume Bristol City won't win at Leeds on Monday night, because if they don't, that means they've still got to secure a playoff place on the final day, so there's that. And Preston are the most out-of-form team in the whole division. 4 losses on the bounce, 1 win in 4 team. No team has won fewer points in that time than them. So I'm struggling to find words of encouragement for Preston fans, although they'll know full well how much danger they're in because of the boos at full time after they lost to Plymouth. Yeah. They were very aware of how crap everything is at the moment. But they are properly sleepwalked into danger like I've never seen before. A perfect example of that is 7 games ago, Preston were 12 points clear of Luton. Now they're level on points. It's astonishing. And their best hope for staying up on the final day may actually come down to other teams doing them favours, Justin, because I seriously have not much ambition when it comes to Preston getting out of this.
Yeah, and Paul Heckingbottom's words last week now do start to ring quite true after all of this, because the squad is clearly not up to the quality. If your manager's with a couple of games to go, complaining and suggesting that he needs to rip it up and start again, timing-wise, probably not the best from Paul Heckingbottom, because what confidence is that going to put into the players? But also, are these players good enough for this level? Apparently not. And they're hurtling towards League One. It's a scare. As I say, it's a very scary scenario for Preston going into that final game.
Yeah, and the only way, or the most likely way at the moment that they are saved from going into League One is that another team kind of just fills that gap for them instead. And that's how scary things are really with them. Stoke City also heading into the final day with a lot of nerves. It's after they lost 2-0 at home to Sheffield United. 3-word review for Sheffield United. Cappy says ready for playoffs. Exactly what they needed, really, wasn't it, Justin?
Yeah, absolutely. A professional win. That's what it felt like. Also, I mean, even after all the results we've had over the past day or so, this game feels like it was 2 weeks ago. Yeah. Yes, the Saturday games were just absolutely, energy zapping in a sense. But you are right; it was just a tonic for Sheffield United. Professional win, clean sheet. The confidence that will breathe into the players will be massive going into a very tense set of playoffs. That Sheffield United form team going into it potentially. So things swing in their favour a little bit more.
Well, this result leaves Stoke on 50 points, 2 points clear of the bottom 3, and then 1 point above 3 teams on 49. They, of course, face one of those teams on the final day, Derby County. And I've seen some chat in the second-tier Discord, Justin, saying it's very unlikely Stoke actually go down, but I don't think it's that outrageous, is it? Yes. Derby would need to beat Stoke. Hull and Luton would also need to win, and Preston not to lose. But we've seen weirder things happen over the years, haven't we? We've seen weirder things happen over the last few weeks. So if Stoke concede an early goal against Derby, there'll be a few squeaky bums in that away end, I imagine.
Yeah, I think this game's going to be a measure of character, isn't it, for Stoke? Is, you know, have they got a lot of it, or have they got any of it really? When you're looking at character and momentum, do Derby have more of it? They're the questions that I would be asking. I think Stoke certainly have technical quality, but when the pressure is high, you need players to step up. So that'll be my concern for Stoke on the day where the pressure will be at its highest, and the obvious threats that Derby do possess. And I think you can nullify a game very easily against Stoke. You can just zap the quality out of it, and they do struggle. And Derby have been doing that really, really well. So there are some variables here that really do work against Stoke. But you are right, nothing's inconceivable. Nothing's inconceivable. I wouldn't go into this final round of games with any complacency as a supporter, player, manager, because what we've seen over the past couple of weeks is teams do the impossible, and you know, things like Stoke avoiding relegation felt like an impossible feat even just a week or two ago. But now they're in it. That 6-0 defeat to Leeds as well, this hurt them goal difference wise. Yeah, it's giving me heartburn just thinking about the Stoke fans, to be honest with you.
Am I right in saying that Birmingham, I think this time last year we were saying the same thing about Birmingham heading into the final day, and they even won, didn't they, and still went down. So just goes to show that, you know, anything can happen on the final day. It really, really can. And it'll be even more interesting if Stoke did go down now, because we'd now be guaranteed a Stoke derby next season with Port Vale getting promoted to League One. So that'll be the first time they've met in like 23 years, which would be intriguing. So we'll see how they get on next week with regards to that. By the way, Justin, I hate to be that guy, but do you remember that we had a £50 bet at the start of the season on Stoke finishing above 14th? You said they would, but it's now impossible for them to do that.
Can you send my invoice to Jonathan Walters, who single-handedly fucked that up by sacking Stephen Schumacher? Thank you.
What if I just send it to you instead?
No. Stephen, send it to Jonathan Walters. I don't know what the address is for the Bet365 Stadium, but just send it that way.
Okay, coward. Oxford United are officially safe. It's after a 2-0 victory at home to Sunderland. 3 reviews for Oxford. Steve says, we're staying up. Jace says, we're here to stay. For Sunderland, Michael says, didn't want it. Aaron says, utter effing disgrace. Dan on our Patreon says, just resting, honestly. Wilkes says, who needs momentum? Yeah, we'll talk about Sunderland very shortly, but a pretty comfortable win, really, for Oxford. And what an achievement by Gary Rowett to keep them up, Justin. Probably the smallest budget in the league. They were second from bottom when he took over in December, had lost 8 from 10, and he's kept them up with a game to spare. Superb stuff.
I truly, genuinely think he should be in the running for manager of the season, Gary Rowett. Yeah. Oxford should have been relegated by means of resource and record prior to Gary Rowett coming into the club. But what he's done and what he's achieved, and again, even the January signings were very, very smart. Very, very smart. Miko Helix, I think the creme de la creme, and I don't know why other clubs didn't go in for him, who needed a defender who defends, but he's also very, very effective in the box. Of course, he scored against Sunderland here as well. And, you know, those sort of signings, they just have Gary Rowett written all over him. Tom Bradshaw is the other one. It hasn't contributed a whole lot, but good old wise heads that needed to be in that squad. And, you know, the quality he's got out of other individuals as well. Again, it's just what Gary Rowett does. Yes, it can be boring, but Gary Rowett is the key for Oxford establishing themselves in the Championship. And I think once they do, you know, where can they go? Well, resource-wise, it might work against them a bit, but there's a lot of potential under Gary Rowett, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, well, they looked as if they were going down before he came in because they were so out of form towards the end of Des Buckingham's reign. But in comes Rowett, instant 9-game unbeaten run. Did drop off after that, but they've managed to muster together enough points to get them to this stage, and it's a great achievement. It was a big mountain for them to climb to stay up, and they're likely going to finish above some big teams who have spent a lot more money than Oxford. So yeah, it's a brilliant, brilliant season. With Birmingham and Wrexham coming up from League One, I do look at little old Oxford and think, it's going to be even tougher to stay up next season. But in the here and now, it's a great achievement. And because of that, I completely agree with you, Justin. I'd make Gary Rowett one of my managers of the season. Because what he's done this season has been absolutely superb. Just quickly, Justin, are Sunderland having the worst preparation for the playoffs that we've ever seen? 4 losses on the bounce, just 4 wins in 14 since losing to Hull, which is when their automatic promotion hopes effectively ended. And I know results don't necessarily mean anything right now for Sunderland. All that matters is how they get on in the actual playoffs. It's not exactly promising, though, is it?
No, I remember Darren Moore having a similar set of not similar set of results. They had a really bad run of form at West Brom. Darren Moore did a few years ago. West Brom ended up getting to the playoffs and obviously lost to Aston Villa. But it cost Darren Moore his job. I'm not suggesting that should be the case for Regis Labrice by any means, but it just goes to show how much Sunderland have dropped off. Wilson Isidore, who was one of my favourite players in the division, scored in 10 games, 10 or 11 games. They just look blunt. They look like they're low on confidence. Their defensive qualities that I think was the key for Sunderland under Regis Labrice to them pushing it at the table and being title contenders, quote unquote, at the start of or in the first sort of 3 or 4 months of the season. They're not there anymore. So I think all the positives that we've spoken about with Sunderland not seen since probably the turn of the year. It's a huge worry going into the playoffs. That being said, this season has been an overachievement. That's worth saying. So expectations can be tempered a little bit, but when you're in it, you got to make the most of it. And Sunderland aren't. That's the point.
Yeah. Well, you're absolutely right. And bar Leo Hjelde, you look at this Sunderland starting 11 that they had against Oxford in the loss to Oxford. And it's essentially Sunderland's strongest 11. And it's not just results that have been bad. The performances have been awful. Only scored 1 goal in their last 5 games against not a great set of teams either. It's really, really concerning. They have been one of the best teams in the league at various stages this season. But this is without a doubt their worst run of form. And it's come at a pretty dreadful time in the run-up to the playoffs because while it has no bearing on where they actually finish, it's definitely going to have an impact on confidence, isn't it? So yeah, very strange what's going on there. I definitely didn't see it coming, but now I'm very worried about Sunderland heading into what is obviously their biggest games of the season. And finally, Blackburn and Millwall have kept their playoff hopes alive after wins against Watford and Swansea, respectively. I will just quickly read some Swansea 3-red reviews, Justin, because there are quite a few referring to something that happened this weekend. I will admit, I did laugh. Luke says, lost but buzzing. Jay says, Wales celebrated hard. Lucio says, down, down, down. Allard says, best defeat ever. It's I'm sorry for laughing, Cardiff fans. But we've been saying throughout the show how this was the perfect weekend in terms of making the relegation battle as interesting as possible on the final day, Justin. It was also the same for the playoff race, because if Bristol City lose tomorrow night against Leeds, we have just 3 points separating 5 teams.
Yeah, I think the playoff race sometimes goes under the radar because of how significant automatics can be and obviously relegation. But I think the race for sort of most of the time 6th place is absolute carnage. You know, you look at the Swansea Forest scenario a few years ago where Swansea snuck into the playoffs ahead of Forest because Forest threw away several goals and Swansea scored a couple of goals their way. You know, it's that sort of swing. I think Blackpool secured their place in the playoffs all those years ago on doing Holloway. The playoffs that they went on to win on the final day as well. It's those set of circumstances that are just absolutely bonkers. So I think, you know, when you've got like a Millwall or a Blackburn, what? By the way,
it's crazy, isn't it?
Byron Ishmael's going to get sacked 2 weeks ago. What's going on? But this again is what I've said at the start of the show. Is what I've said already. The craziness that this league brings is genuinely joyous. It really, really is.
Yeah, imagine if you told us like 4 weeks ago that Blackburn would be in this position now, where they are just 1 point behind Coventry in 6th. It's absolutely insane, isn't it? But the excitement on the final day is slightly undermined by the fact that Blackburn have to go to Sheffield United and Millwall have to go to Burnley, and both of them need to win to stand any chance of getting a playoff place because Coventry and Middlesbrough are playing each other. So it is unlikely for both those two, but you never know. As we keep saying, stranger things have happened on the final day. And keep in mind, Millwall are one of the only two teams to beat Burnley this season. Who knows, as I say. But yeah, the likelihood is that sixth place will go down to whoever wins that massive game between Coventry and Middlesbrough on the final day, which is a very juicy game in its own right. But, you know, if Millwall, for example, score an early goal at Burnley, then there may be a bit of panic for those two sides. So yeah, it's as interesting as it could be on the final day. And it's good that it's not just the relegation battle providing entertainment for us heading into that. Justin, let's do the polls as the part of the show where we give the listeners 3 questions on Twitter. Just want to get their thoughts on everything to do with the Championship. The first question is this: who do we think is getting relegated from the Championship on the final day? Hull, Luton, Preston, Derby/Stoke. Can only do 4 options, so I've combined Derby and Stoke. Don't give your answer, Justin. Save that for next Friday's preview show, brought to you by SBK. 45% of people said Hull. 31% said Preston, 13% said Derby/Stoke, 11% said Luton. So that's how that one is looking there. Do we think Cardiff will instantly bounce back from League One? Yes or no, Justin?
No. I don't think they will.
I find it hard to have any encouragement with that happening as well. 80% of people said no, 20% said yes. And finally, how much water do you drink on your average day? More than 3.5 pints, fewer than 3.5 pints?
Yeah, I've gotten really bad sort of the last couple of weeks. I would say fewer than 3.5 pints.
Really? Well, you're a big CrossFit guy. You need hydration.
Yeah, and when I get to do a workout or squatting by sort of 5 p.m, I'm absolutely dead on my feet because I've simply not been drinking enough water. One thing people also neglect is their electrolytes. You've got to get your electrolytes.
I don't know what they are. They
There you
sound
go.
good though. Is it to do with water?
Yeah, put a bit of salt in your water with a bit of cordial. Perfect.
Oh, there you go. Well, I drink water like it's going out of fashion. I've always drank a lot of water. Sometimes like 8 pints a day, Justin. I'm a hydrated man. Fewer than 3.5 pints got 61%.
Yeah.
And 39% said more than 3.5 pints. But there you go, ladies and gents. That's been water. That's been the polls. And this has been the Second Tier Podcast. Patreon subscribers, don't go anywhere. We've got the extended edition of the weekend show coming up, which we like to call Zamora Time. We'll be talking about Wrexham's promotion, Ipswich's relegation, Marty Cifuentes possibly leaving QPR, and Jamie Vardy to Sheffield Wednesday. Ho, ho, ho. If you're not a Patreon subscriber, sign up to get Zamora Time in every single weekend show. Head over to patreon.com/second tier. Link is in the description of this episode. Otherwise, that's just about time for us here on the Second Tier Podcast. We'll be back again tomorrow night. We'll be doing a live stream on our YouTube channel, fresh off the back of Leeds v Bristol City. Big game in terms of the title race and in terms of the playoff race. So we'll look forward to seeing them for that. But otherwise, this has been the Second Tier Podcast. I've been Ryan Dilks.
I've been Justin Peach.
And a big thank you for listening.